Hey guys, welcome to HipHughes History. In the next 5 minutes or so, we're going to give you guys the skinny on Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of Treasury and one of the writers of the Federalist Papers, and just an all-around cosmopolitan kind of guy. This is not a lecture for anybody doing in-depth study, but basically you're going to just get the basic facts and the thematic idea about my friend Alexander. So number one, I always have kids kind of give him the middle name Schwarzenegger, so we'll refer to him as Alexander Schwarzenegger Hamilton because he is a big, strong Federalist, and he's thought of being kind of the founder and the first head of the Federalist Party. I also tell kids to give him a big gangster tattoo of a dollar sign across his chest, and that'll remind you that he is kind of the economic man, the money man. So what we want to do is, I'm not going to give you a biographical sketch of Alexander Hamilton, although his life is quite interesting, born outside the country in I think the West Indies. I think he was adopted. He came here when he was like 11. He kind of goes to school at a very young age. He ends up as Washington's assistant during the Revolutionary War, yada, yada, yada. But one thing that he did really come into his own on was his criticisms of the Articles of Confederation. He is the kind of the leader of the Annapolis Convention, which was an attempt, it's the bell, was an attempt to get rid of the Articles of Confederation, first to rewrite them, and then eventually, when Alexander found that you really couldn't amend the Articles of Confederation, he decides that it's best just to toss them, and he starts writing the Federalist Papers during the Constitutional Convention to get that ratified. Before we get into kind of the skinny on him as Secretary of Treasury and some of the economic ideas that he's best known for, I always remind kids that he also is, I don't want to call him an elitist because that sounds like kind of like class warfare or something, but one of the quotes that always kind of springs to my mind when I'm thinking of Alexander Hamilton, and I'm going to mess the quote up as I butcher it a little bit, is basically he said that all communities divide themselves into the few and the many. The first are rich and well-born, and the other are the mass of the people which are turbulent and changing. Therefore, basically give the power to the first class so they may check the unsteadiness of the others. He's not a big fan of democracy. He sees democracy very much as kind of mob rule, and that he really believes in the republic, and that the republic is there to make crafty decisions on trade and economic issues, to grow the economy, and to be a protector of private property. And sometimes mobs of people in democracy don't exactly do that. But those of people that are critical of the Constitution from kind of an elite standard, kind of like a Beard's interpretation, economic interpretation of the Constitution, they kind of always point to Hamilton and kind of, he's the fancy boy who, kind of had his nose in the air and wanted to give power to the people that already had power. But nevertheless, as Secretary of Treasury, he is a Federalist, and he's definitely going to take command of some central issues that are really important to the growth of the country and definitely the historical nature of the country. Number one, he is responsible for the first excise tax in American history. It's basically a sales tax, when he convinces Washington to lobby a pretty high tax on the sales of whiskey. And of course this leads to the Whiskey Rebellion, where Hamilton actually rejoins the army and him and Washington go up and bada boom, bada bing, take care of those Whiskey Rebellion people and really show the country that the Supremacy Clause is for real, and that the federal government in this relationship of federalism is going to reign supreme over the states. So I always kind of explain to kids that the Whiskey Rebellion is kind of the opposite of Shays' Rebellion. So if Shays' Rebellion showed that the federal government was too weak, Whiskey Rebellion shows you who your daddy is. Second, he is really the first pusher of tariffs. And tariffs are a great way to raise money, and they also are a great way to protect American domestic manufacturers. So it's kind of a northern concept. Most of the manufacturers are up in the northeast of the country, where the natural harbors are and such. So Hamilton, as Secretary of the Treasury, convinces Washington and Congress to pass a series of tariffs, which the South sees as kind of an abomination, because whenever you have a tariff, that means that prices are going to go up in stores. So if you're a Southerner and you're shopping at Walmart, of course Walmart's not there back then, you're going to see the price of everything go up. But on the other hand, if you're a manufacturer, if you sell underwear in Boston, people are going to be buying more of your Boston because French underwear is going to be very expensive. So make sure you know a tariff is a tax on an import, and that Hamilton got those tariffs passed in order to protect U.S. manufacturers and grow domestic manufacturers. And the last thing that you really need to know, and there's lots of other stuff, but the last big thematic idea is the idea of the national debt. Before the national debt, states carried their own debt. Under the Articles, this was true, and most of the northern states had a very high debt from the cost of the Revolutionary War. So what Hamilton proposes and gets done is creating a national debt, where the federal government assumes the debt for the states. And this is great if you're a northern state, because it kind of takes the debt off your back. The problem is that it kind of puts it on the whole country's back. So again, the southern states are not completely thrilled that the national debt has kind of put a little bit of debt on them in a sense as well. He's also the founder of the National Bank, and he convinces Congress that the elastic clause, kind of a loose interpretation of the Constitution, can be used to put forward the national bank to basically control currency. And this is going to come up in McCulloch versus Maryland, when the Supreme Court under John Marshall is going to agree that there is a constitutionality to the national bank with implied powers in the elastic clause. And also that Maryland isn't going to be able to tax that national bank, which is a kind of a who's your daddy clause thing too. So Hamilton, you know, national debt, national bank, whiskey tax, Secretary of Treasury, gangster federalist. Eventually, he's going to turn against the Federalist Party, who nominates Aaron Burr, I believe. No, John Adams. I think he turned against John Adams in 1800, and he eventually is going to support his nemesis, Thomas Jefferson, over Aaron Burr, who he thought was kind of a ding-dong. And a few years later, down the road, he actually had an affair with his wife. He fell out of politics, yada, yada, yada. Aaron Burr hated him, man. He was single-handedly responsible for denying Aaron Burr not only the presidency, but later the governorship of New York. And eventually, on the banks of the Hudson River, they have a duel. And Aaron Burr shot him in the, I think, in the abdomen. I think Hamilton hit a branch above him. Like during the duel, Hamilton was being a gentleman. He's like, I'm not going to shoot the guy in the face. I'll shoot above his head. Burr was like, bam! And Hamilton died. The end!